I'd like to call the meeting of the Nashua Board of Education to order. It is May 29th, and we are in the Nashua North Boardroom. It is 7:02. Could the clerk please call the roll?
Mr. Mosher?
I'm here.
Mrs. Oden?
Here.
Mr. Kaufman?
Here.
Ms. Raymond?
Here.
Ms. Timmons?
Here.
Ms. Hohensie?
Here.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Here.
Mr. Garino is here. Ms. Porter?
Here.
Mr. Gillis?
Here.
Other attendees are Dr. Mosley?
Here.
Dr. McKinney? Ms. Fitzpatrick?
Here.
Mr. Donovan? And Ms. O'Gara.
Here.
Mr. Mosher is attending this meeting by telephone as he recuperates at home. Are you by yourself, Mr. Mosher?
Yes, I am.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. And we're going to have Mr. Garino lead us in the prayer, and Ms. Timmons will lead us in the pledge. But beforehand, I'd like all of us to stand for a moment of silence for Mr. Steve Norris, longtime band director, music director here in Nashua, probably about 45 years, grandfather of Alexandra Norris, who served on the board, and certainly a well-respected man here in Nashua. So if we could stand for a moment of silence, and then the clerk will lead us in the prayer. Thank you.
Almighty God, we have the high honor and the serious duty of managing the educational institutions of our beloved city. In our common endeavors, may we find a spirit of unity and understanding which will enable us to face our multiple problems with an objective mind, with justice and charity for all, so that any and all decisions made by us will be for the betterment and greater happiness of all of our fellow citizens. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
I watched on TV. That's beautiful. Is there anything that needs to be removed from the consent agenda? I will ask that the Human Resources Committee meeting minutes from, I believe it is May 23rd. No, I'm sorry. The personnel recommendations from May 23rd be removed for my benefit, because I will not be voting on them to avoid a conflict of interest. So,
Second.
thank you.
Mrs. Oden,
Well, pardon?
Clarification, why you have to remove them? Can't we vote on them?
Oh, no, the personnel recommendations, the rest of you can vote on them. I need to abstain. I can approve the rest of the minutes, but my son-in-law's name is on the list for one of the coaches, and I do not want to have a conflict of interest in any way.
Well, I understand that, but you don't have to remove them.
once you declare,
You can just vote abstain.
Okay.
but
But
Mrs.
I
Oden,
want to approve the rest of them.
Can we move them and just to put them in HR where we normally do them? Because I think there's some discussion on them tonight by several board members.
No, I think we should leave them as is, and
Okay.
I will abstain from approving the entire consent agenda. Thank you.
excuse me,
No.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
you and I had a brief conversation before the meeting started. I had made a request. I got it in on time to review something specific to one of the personnel recommendations. And I don't want to hold up all the recommendations, and I would appreciate it if we could go into non-public at some point, perhaps when we get to HR committee. Maybe that is a better place to do it, because that's typically where we do the personnel recommendations, I thought, anyway. But I do want to, I have something I want to bring to the board. I sent it out. It should have been on the agenda. It's not on the agenda. The documentation I asked for was not provided to us. And I'd like to have that conversation before we approve these particular
Then I would,
personnel recommendations.
if I were you, I would ask to remove that from the consent agenda.
Well, I seconded
Okay.
your intent, so there is a vote to take it off the consent agenda. That's where I thought you were headed, and then, the conversation kind of deflected to an unexpected place. So I thought that's why you were doing what you were doing. So can we vote to remove the personnel recommendations from the consent agenda?
Okay. Mr. Guarino, could we have a vote on that, please?
On the motion to remove from the consent agenda the personnel appointments, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons, Ms. Hohensie,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter,
Yes.
motion carries 9-0.
Okay. So can we have a vote on accepting the consent agenda without the personnel recommendations?
So moved.
Thank you.
Seconded. On the motion to approve the consent agenda, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons, Ms. Hohensie,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter,
Yes.
motion carries 9-0.
Okay. Items removed from the consent agenda, I am asking that that be removed as I explained because I want to avoid any conflict. And Mr. Kaufman, you had some questions you had about one of the nominations?
Yes, I did, and I think it's best that we discuss that in non-public. The question is, when do we do that? And I leave that up to the chair.
Gee, we have quite a few people here. I hate for them to sit here too long. Do you think it will be more than 10 minutes, Mr. Kaufman?
No, I don't think it has to be. I'll say it that way.
Okay. So I'll look for a motion to go in non-public, and then if it's more than 10 minutes, we will have to come out of non-public and continue it later in the meeting.
Motion to go into non-public under RSA, under RSA 91A3 to B, the hiring of any person as a public employee.
Second.
Okay? Roll call.
On the motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A32B, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter,
Yes.
motion carries 9-0.
At 7:10.
And we're in non-public at 7:11.
I'm looking for a motion.
I move to seal the minutes of the non-public session.
Second.
Okay. Roll call.
On, who seconded that, Ms. Timmons?
No,
Ms.
Porter.
Porter.
Oh, Ms. Porter, okay. On the motion to seal the public minutes,
No
Non-public.
private, no.
on the motion to seal the non-public minutes, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Okay, I'm looking for a motion to approve the personnel recommendations that were removed from the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Ms. Hohensie?
Thank you. I'm going to vote against this for two reasons. One, because I wanted some information, as Mr. Kaufman had asked for. We didn't get it, and I don't like voting on things when I'm not informed. And the second, for the behavior of a board member in non-public who refused to apologize when imputing my motives. When I'm trying to get information, that's not a smokescreen to slow things down. I'm disappointed at the board president for not reprimanding someone for doing that. And if I ask for information, it's just so I can be knowledgeable on a vote. I didn't appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Who seconded Mr. Mosher's,
Ms.
I did.
Ms. Timmons? Okay.
Timmons?
We vote now.
Okay.
Take over.
Are we ready for the
Roll call.
for the roll call on the vote to approve the personnel recommendations? Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Abstain.
Mr. Kaufman,
No.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie,
No.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses, 1 abstention, and 2 noes.
Okay, communication outside the consent agenda. None noted. Okay. Public question and comment period limited to items on this agenda. Is there anybody signed up? Was there a sign-up sheet? Okay. I know. Thank you. Your name and address.
Hello, my name is Ken Heaton. I am a social studies teacher at the Nashua High School South. And I'm here in regards to an item listed in the minutes from a previous meeting regarding the end of the school year schedule from last meeting. And I sent a letter an email to most of you voicing some of my concerns, but I wanted to make a public statement here as I had numerous people in my building voicing concerns over this end of the year safety protocol training that is scheduled for the 22nd. So I'd just like to read some thoughts on that if that's appropriate. Okay. So on June 22nd, Friday, June 22nd is the last scheduled day for teachers and staff. The last 2 hours of that day, we have been told that we're required to show up to a mandatory safety meeting in the various schools and locations around the district. I have some serious concerns about the benefits that training will confer to our faculty and staff. Mainly for this reason. If we want to do something as important as protecting and keeping our students and staff safe, we need to do it right. And I have grave concerns that a 2-hour meeting is going to do it right. I'm a member of the Building Safety Committee at Nashua High School South, and we've discussed at length various ways and methods and training that we would like at the high school in order to help protect ourselves, but also educate and make students part of the solution for this epidemic of violence that is, sweeping our nation or is across our nation. In several of these meetings, I have spoken with our school SRO officer as well as the director of plant operations, Chris Lassard, about proposed training and what would be most beneficial for our school. It was made clear to me that the Nashua Police Department has a protocol that they highly endorse and would love to train us on. All the information I have about that training, has told me that training will require between 5 and 6 hours, not 2. that in that training, faculty and staff should be placed in small groups no bigger than 30, where they should work through a series of theoretical scenarios as well as actual practice in the building where those people reside or where they teach, so they can move and react to active scenarios, followed by a series of debriefings and processing time to work out how this training went and how best to apply this protocol to our individual buildings. I don't think trying to put all that into some sort of 2-hour training in the last 2 hours before a teacher is supposed to go away for vacation is the most effective use of our time, nor shall it probably tangibly in any way improve the safety of our schools. Trying to shoehorn such a vital piece of training into possibly the worst possible time, I think is irresponsible. You're going to have administrative turnovers. You're going to have teacher turnovers. We're not going to necessarily be involving all the paraprofessionals or hourly staff. I'm not sure who's going to be there or not, and I don't think anybody really is. I don't think the buy-in is going to be what we would like, and quite frankly, I think that will be a disservice to the police officers who are going to come to our schools and try and do their job to a population that is, I don't want to say I don't want to hear it, we do, but we want it done right. And the sense is we've got no real information about how this is going to play out, what sort of training we're really going to get. Just having a police officer talk to 300 people in a room for 2 hours straight about possibly some of the most important training we should have as teachers does not seem like a good educational practice to me. So we want this type of training. We need this type of training, but we want it to be done right. We want it to be done thoroughly. We want the right time and tools to process and make this something that we all can buy into. And the timing of this, I am very disappointed in, because it looks like it's just an optics thing. We're just checking a box saying, yes, we had training this year, and so everyone is now safe. And I'm sure there's the best intention in mind, and we would want to continue this next year, but the timing of this at the end of the year in this manner, without any real collaboration or talking with teachers in the buildings themselves about what we want and what we need, that communication hasn't happened, and I don't feel like the buy-in is going to be what this district needs. So I would ask the board to consider what their options are and reschedule some sort of training for us in the fall so that we can dedicate the time that we need to make our schools actually safer, not just checking a box. Thank you very much for your time.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak?
Thank you. Dana Darrow, 32 Nightingale Road in Nashua. I'm also a 21-year veteran of the Nashua School District. I'm a parent as well of a student in the middle schools here in Nashua. So I'm here tonight to speak to you regarding some things that Ken spoke about, but also more looking towards the future. I'm looking at being prepared in case of, rather than reacting to, active shooters in our schools. I'm sure you all received my email, as well as others from numerous colleagues, expressing our concerns about the, what is my opinion, last-minute, underdeveloped plan for mandatory training that's been scheduled for June 22nd. According to what I have been told after calling the Nashua Police Department, this program is designed to be at least 5 hours of training. You're jamming it into 2 hours on the very last day of school. This training should include new employees to the district and doesn't necessarily need to include those retiring or leaving the district after June 22nd. As it is also designed to do so, it will be much more effective to have the training during the start of the school year in September and also include students. According to the Washington Post and Fox News, over 187,000 school-age children have been exposed to gun violence since Columbine. 187,000 children in America. In 2018 alone, there have been 17 school shootings.
What I come to ask you today about is what is the district and the city going to do about prevention? What are we going to do to prevent school shootings from happening? The tools and plans that we currently have in place do little to nothing to stop a murder from entering the schools and slaughtering children and staff. We don't have enough resources and staff to keep our children and our staff safe currently. We don't have metal detectors or wands. We don't have bulletproof glass or doors in our classes. There are some classes in some schools that don't even have doors. You have open concept. Instead, the safety committee at South came up with a plan. We were given laminated pieces of purple paper with magnets to put on our windows to hide behind when an intruder comes into the school. We don't have enough school psychologists or school counselors, crisis intervention specialists to deal with students that are in crisis. We have not had proper and meaningful professional development in recognizing signs of distress or violence in quite a long time. And like I said, I've been here over 21 years. This is affecting Nashua. This weekend alone, there was, mind you, a non-credible, but yet still a threat made against a middle school in Nashua. People are starting to get scared to send their children to school. You need to hire more school psychologists. The city needs to hire more police officers, and more resource officers need to be in the schools. You need to hire the appropriate amount of necessary administrators so that discipline can be handled in a consistent and timely manner. Hire more security in the schools. We do not have the number of trained personnel to keep us safe. Let me explain this fact to you. Did you know that it is more difficult and more secure to get into the senior prom than it is to get into the school building on a daily basis? Anyone can walk into the school building with anything in their bag, their pocket, or their backpack and coats before the school day begins every day at school. At the prom, seniors and their guests must have all purses and bags checked. All pockets are emptied and contents therein are shown to the administrators. Those wearing pants and jackets must lift up their pant leg and open their jackets and show what they are carrying. Those wearing dresses must lift up skirts to the ankles. Things that are not allowed on a typical school day on the school grounds are removed from that person. This doesn't happen every day in your schools. Why is this the case? Why are we not securing the buildings in such a way that teachers can focus on teaching? Why is the prom more secure than our buildings are on a daily basis? We can no longer stand by and have anyone tell us it's just a matter of money. We get it. But parents are not okay, and I'm included in this, with the fact that there is money and training for me to be able to tourniquet a child's leg, arm, or head, make sure that I use the same lingo as everybody else in town, keep a class quiet and away from the windows, but nothing to do to prevent the violence from occurring. Now is not the time to cut corners. Even reducing a 5-hour course down to 2 hours is dangerous, in my opinion. Until you are really ready to act and create change that will protect our children in the school, as well as the custodians, the teachers, the lunchroom staff, paraprofessionals, secretaries, anybody who walks into a school, we will continue to fight this fight for meaningful change. We will remember this at the ballot box. I beg you, please do not allow Nashua to become another gruesome statistic. There is some power to be had in this. I implore you to use it. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who didn't sign up who would like to speak? Okay. Superintendent Comments.
Good evening, everyone. I'll start off by just giving some updates, and then I will get to some thoughts that were shared earlier. On May 19th, I had an opportunity, that's a Saturday, I had a nice opportunity to attend the teacher leadership event for our teachers who are doing some professional development in their respective cohorts. I wasn't able to get to the morning session of that, but I was certainly able to get to the afternoon session. I believe the teachers did a nice job, certainly informative. I'm looking forward to taking some of the work and working with those teachers to, I would say, infuse and I would say, mend those initiatives that they were working on into some of our committee work, the things we're working district-wide with our committees with Dr. McKinney and Donna Fitzpatrick. I also met with the union today, and there was a nice discussion about how we can better do that or better serve our kids and making sure that the professional development that we offer and can offer for our teachers and for our students could really proliferate. So that was a very nice event, and thank you for inviting me. Part of the thing that sometimes we talk about things that are not working, sometimes we talk about things that you say, this isn't working, that isn't working, but I have some good news. We just got back our WIDA scores, and our WIDA scores are for our ELL students, and so I tend to have higher expectations, but I'll take what I call a little bit of win, like, lose, win. I'll take some win in the sense that our ELL scores on the WIDA test went up from about 2.4% from last year to 4.6%. I've always said we can always improve, and I want to just congratulate and really give a shout out to those teachers, administrators, more importantly, the kids who have definitely put in the time and the effort to make sure that those scores and their education is important to them, but also to really highlight, again, the great things that our teachers do here in the district. On May 16th, we had our professional development at the elementary school. Thank you, Dr. McKinney, for setting that up. The coordinators, principals, I can't begin to tell you how important the work is. We had some trainings that entailed Lucy Cockings. We had trainings that were vertical and horizontal team alignments, Eureka Math reflection. This was what I would consider our last professional development training for our elementary teachers for this year. And I just want to say that thank you so much. On today, I just want to acknowledge Veronica Bowden. We had a Lions Club Teacher of the Year recognition. Ms. Bowden is our ELL teacher at Fairgrounds Elementary School, and she was nominated. It was in the paper. I just want to say congratulations to Ms. Bowden for all of her work that she does every day. I had an opportunity to meet, I remembered his name only because my uncle is Alfred, so I met her husband Alfred and their son. It was a very nice event for our community, for our kids, and for our teachers, and thank you for that. I'm on a lighter note. I wish that we had the weather that we had yesterday, for our Memorial Day parade that our kids participated in. And for those of you who did not have an opportunity to go out there or anything like that, check out my Twitter account. I was out there tweeting all of the kids, and they did a really nice job. Thank you to the band teachers. Thank you to the kids that showed up. It was a kind of a very cold, miserable day, but our kids did a really nice job honoring our veterans, being a part of the community, and really doing a nice job with just the music, the atmosphere. It was just nice to see. I always love an old town parade, and thank you to the mayor's office. Thank you to our aldermen. Thank you to our veterans. Thank you for your service. It was just nice. So I really appreciate that. Well, I guess fortunately for me, this is our last. I held the last Mosley's Muffins today over at Amherst Street. Thank you to the teachers that came out. Thank you to Dr. Sorry, her name's Scarpati. Slipped my name. Sorry, Jennifer. I really appreciate the hospitality. We had a chance to talk to teachers, had a chance to just do what I really like to do, is just interact and get a sense of what our kids are doing. I'd like to talk to the public here, talk to the public out there about this safety training. This is by far something that needs to be talked about, but also something that I'm very clear with, that I'm not negotiating this, because this is about the safety of our kids. Over the last couple of months, I have been in communication with the Nashua Police about this safety training, and the name of the training is Avoid, Defend, and Deny. And so it's ADD is the acronym. And in my mind, this training is paramount to the district, and that we have a plan in the event of emergency. We need to be on the same page with the Nashua the Nashua Police Department in the event of a school shooting or what I define as a school tragedy. I attended the safety training along with the board president, along with the president of the union, Mr. Marcoux. We had Keith Richards there, the leadership for the administrators. We had Mr. Mark Lucas was there as well, and we had Chief Lavoie was there, and a number of officers were there. Talking about our kids in this manner makes all of us very uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable for a variety of reasons. Number one, I feel personally responsible for the 11,000 plus kids in this district. More importantly, and for me, you know, I am the superintendent, but I have 3 kids of my own here. 1 at the South and 2 at Fairgrounds Middle School. And if 2 hours can save 11,000 kids, or my kids, that is by far something I'm not willing to negotiate or even talk about. I've heard the feedback. I understand that it is not the best time to do this in terms of the timing of the end of the year. This is about the safety and the lives of our kids. This is not about a training of Lucy Calkins or Eureka Math or writing program. This is something where, in the event of an emergency, we know as a district how the police are going to react, how we can react to keep our kids safe. I understand how emotional that this topic can be for our community. And yes, we did have 2 incidences over at our middle school. And yes, and if you want to do a timeline, it did happen. But we had principals there who didn't go home on Friday until it was addressed. And I want to say thank you for the law enforcement agency that also came out on that Friday to make sure that our schools were safe. And we followed a protocol. You heard from our principals. The board was informed about it. Yes, yesterday, 1, 2, and a principal were on the phone during Memorial Day, following safety protocols to make sure that our schools are safe. We don't get time off for the safety of our kids. In this year alone, our kids are being murdered in school. Parkland was this year. The Texas incident was this year. Not 2 years ago, not 3 years ago. Didn't happen in another country, didn't happen in another, worlds away. It happened here in the United States. This is not a gun debate. This is about understanding the realities we live in. And we live in a reality where school shootings happen in our schools. You cannot plan for a school shooting. You cannot tell a school shooter or anyone like, listen, how about you do it next week or in October? That doesn't work that way. If we do nothing and something happens, who lives with that? Who is that? In this district, it's been inertia. It's been, let's wait, let's figure this out. For this particular initiative, if someone is mad or you're upset, it is not this board you should be mad at. Don't be mad at Dr. McKinney. Please don't be mad at Ms. Fitzpatrick. And don't be mad at the law enforcement. I'm prepared as superintendent. You can direct all of your anger and being upset directly at me. And I'm okay with that. Because in the end, this is leadership. This is who we are. And when we think that this can't happen in this community, when we become complacent in a way where we think that this isn't going to happen, that's when we become vulnerable. This district, the fact that we don't have a plan, that we're questioning whether we shelter in place or whether we flee, means we need a plan. We need to keep our kids safe. This is not this training that's going to occur on Friday, June 22nd, is by far not a rushed plan, not a plan that's going to be in no way rushed through. This is the beginning of many trainings. It's a 5-hour training, and the first part of the training is the active shooter. The second part is the triage. This is not an isolated conversation, but an ongoing training that this district will walk through and will do. Yesterday, I was taking my son to the Memorial Day parade, and I was driving up to Fairgrounds, and I said, yeah, I was on my phone, I was waiting for him, he forgot his trumpet at the middle school. And I said, you know, Hutchie, I said, what would you do in a school a school shooting? And he said, well, Dad, depends on where the shots are coming from. I said, I said, what do you mean? He said, if I can hear the shots going from the other side of the building, I'm gonna run. And I'm gonna run to Lead Street, because that's where you'll be. My son knows that because he has been through Alice training. My son knows that because his teachers in his former districts have been through Alice training. I want every single kid and every single teacher to have an opportunity to live and to be part of that training. If you don't know and you don't have that training, it's not about a paper, it's about life. And we owe it, and it is our responsibility to make sure that our kids have a life. The parents in this district, and I'm speaking to the parents, I know you want us to do the right thing, and that's why I'm saying we are going to do the right thing. We're taking time to make sure that your son and daughter are going to be trained. I mean, we're getting training to keep your kids safe. And for that, I'm not negotiating that. We will do what's right for these kids. And the kids, not preference, not a vacation, will come first. I want to personally thank the Nashua Police Department, and particularly Chief Lavoie, Officer Fay. I can't thank you enough for making sure that you have done a great job for being flexible, great job for planning the multiple trainings that we're going to have for this year and next. I personally want to thank your leadership, your collaboration. I want to thank the board for their taking the time to make sure that we can provide this. I want to personally thank the police department for rearranging your schedules to make sure that we have some adequate training for our faculty. We need this training. Chris Lassard, thank you so much. I appreciate all of your support. After the trainings that will take place on Friday, the officers, myself, the administrators will be at the training for any follow-up that you need. Teachers, parents, you'll get some information about the training coming out in our correspondence to you. But this is a very serious matter, and we take it as such. And we are not in an era where things will be okay. We are in the era where we will be proactive in the lives of our kids, and the safety of our kids is paramount. And as superintendent, I will definitely uphold that.
Thank you. Board members' response to the superintendent's comments. Ms. Timmons.
Thank you, Dr. Mosley. So the first training would take place June the 22nd. How many trainings thereafter and how soon?
We have some professional development time in the fall, so I'd have to check the schedules. I also would like to say that there might be some opportunities to do some building-based training as well. But again, I have to work in collaboration with the police department, so it's their availability during the fall time as well will factor into the trainings that we can do. But I just want to say that this is just reiterate that this is not a one and done training. This is multiple trainings that will occur.
Ms. Raymond?
Thank you, Mrs. Oden. I have a couple thoughts on this that I just want to throw out there. First, the first thing I want to say is that I feel very strongly that communication could have helped with some of the emails and some of the feelings that people are expressing. We talked about this last week at Ed Council, and I'll talk about that more later. But let me say, I am 100% in favor of people getting whatever training when we can do it. There were a couple of different proposals that came before this board to make this training happen, one of which was 5 days so it could be spread out and long, one of which was doing it on the Monday so that we could have the longer time. And those were not considered. My understanding is they weren't voted on by the teachers. So I don't know what happened to those, but this seems to be where we're stuck. Having said that, I think if perhaps there was a little bit more communication from Dr. Mosley perhaps, or administration towards the teachers so that they didn't feel the need to call Nashua PD to find out what the training would be like, it might have helped alleviate some of people's concerns. I'm hearing from people speaking and also from emails that people think this is a 6 or 7 hour training. It is not. It is a 5-hour training broken into 2 parts. My understanding from having taken this training myself is that the teachers will be getting exactly what I got, which is the portion on how to deal with an active shooter situation, not the portion on how to deal with triage. I think that would be interesting. It wasn't required by the state when we were required to take it as part of my previous job. The other thing I just want to say about the training, this is one part. The other part is security. If people have been watching our other meetings, that's been quite the theme at the Joint Special Building. We've had other meetings specifically about security. There's a lot of security upgrades and there's a lot of money flowing into that. But I do want to caution everyone, even as a mom, I don't want our schools to turn into prisons. I don't think we should be lifting up people's pant legs to see what they're bringing in. I don't think that we want to have our schools so oppressive that kids don't want to be here and aren't ready for learning. So we need to come up with a balance. And that's all I have to say about that today. But I do think any training that we can get is better than no training. And I think 2 hours is better than nothing. I want our teachers to have the maximum survivability, and I want our kids to have the maximum survivability. And that means having staff knowing what to do, even if you forget a little bit over the summer. It's better than nothing. So.
Ms. Hoansey.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the teachers that came tonight. I'd like to thank the teachers that wrote to us. I think it's good that we have the feedback from the community, and some of them were parents. Later, under new business, I'll move to eliminate the PD safety training on the 22nd and invite the teachers to come to the training on the 25th. I understand there's a contractual problem with demanding it. It would have to be voted on by the union. That's fine. Let's not get into that. But if we invite them to come, they feel that it's worthwhile, it'd be a full day of training. The superintendent hopefully can arrange something that would provide the safety training that teachers need and then continue it in the fall. But while we have that day, we also have paras, secretaries, and food service people that are hourly people. And I'm very upset that they have to punch in to get their pay for Monday, the 25th, and teachers get it without punching in. It's not treating our staff fairly. I'm not saying the teachers are bad for getting it or it's undue or anything, they don't deserve it. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need to treat our staff fairly, evenly. If you're in this unit, you don't get a special Benny, and you're in this unit and you don't. And I know that there's different stipulations between the different unions, and some are more problematic than the other. That's why I think it would be more equitable to, I mean, it's unfortunate that we've got what we've got, but I think the best thing we can do is invite the teachers in, get rid of the training on Friday so they can clean up their classrooms, put away their labs, grade the last finals and get the report cards done, do the normal things without this high-pressure stress that taking 2 hours out of their day would give them. So this lets them have a normal Friday. If they don't want to come for Monday, that's fine, but invite them. And then in the fall, we will pick it, hopefully we will vote to pick it up. I just think it's the best we can do in a bad situation. I didn't vote for what we've got, but hopefully we can make it work for everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. At an earlier meeting, I had asked if the board would be able to attend this training. Are we invited, and when is that when can the board attend this training?
If you'd like to attend the safety training, we certainly can give you a schedule. It's that Friday afternoon in multiple areas.
Thank you.
Do you have anything, Ms. Van Twyver?
No, I don't have anything to add to what has already been said. I thank the teachers for coming in and voicing their opinion. I didn't vote for this either, and I'll probably support Ms. Johanse's motion if it gets to the floor.
Mr. Guarino?
Thank you, Madam President. First, I just want to congratulate the band leaders and the music directors and the students for the parade. Every year, I actually miss the parade, but I'm there every year, and their performances are always fantastic. I want to thank Dr. Mosley for his efforts to improve safety, and I also want to thank the teachers for their cooperation. The logistics are hard, trying to get people in the right place at the right time to do the right thing. It's not an easy thing to do. But we can't always do exactly what we want, but sometimes we do what we can. And to those people that are from the public who are here, and also who emailed us, I'm listening. I also would hope that you also express your opinion to City Hall, because it's very important that we get the proper funding for the things that we need here. I voted against cutting school psychologists, so I know we need the school psychologists. But there's a lot of other needs that we have, and so that's you have to understand that we have our limitations, and those limitations come from City Hall too. So I hope that they voice their opinions not just here, but also there. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mosher, do you have anything?
I'd like to say thank you to Dr. Mosley for his explanations, and say that I agree with him that there is a time when we have to step out and show leadership, and I think that he's doing exactly that. And I thank him very much for his expertise and his own training. And I think that should go very well. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Porter?
This is a very, very difficult topic, and there's no easy answer. I just want to say for the record how disappointed I am that it never went through the 5 days training. To me, that was innovative thinking, creative solution outside the box to get all of our bargaining units trained on a day when they would have been paid. So I think it's a shame, because it sounds like from comments that would have been a good solution for everybody. We would have had every employee trained over the course of 5 days. Not really sure where the breakdown came, and it doesn't really even matter at this point. But I think that going forward, we need to plan ahead for all of the trainings that are going to come next year, so that we're including everyone who's in our schools. Every employee, every student. We need to let parents know. So I think that I really took to heart all of the emails. I've given this a lot of consideration, and it's very difficult. So I can see the points of everyone who's speaking. As a person who worked in school and personally went through 2 lockdowns, not 2 lockdown drills, but I was in lockdowns with my 5th grade students 2 times. This was a few years ago, and until you've been sitting in a classroom with your 5th grade students hiding, crying silently because they know they're not supposed to make any noise, tears running down their face, and rubbing each other's backs, it gives you a different perspective on all of this. That's something that I hope that no other student or teacher would have to go through. So while this is far from perfect, it is a start. I hope that our administration and bargaining units can work together to make something better next year. It's already May 29th. I think that we've gone through 3 versions of this already, and it just seems kind of late. It's May 29th, and we want to go through something for June 22nd. When I vote for the, I have all my peers, all my teacher friends, my colleagues, and sitting on this side is tough. And I don't want you to think that I can only speak for myself, to take my vote lightly. But while this is imperfect, I think at this point, the wisest thing is to move forward and in a very considered and deliberate way, make this better next year. If anybody has a better solution, please raise your hand and let me know, or email. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to, at this point, congratulate our ELL teachers for their WIDA scores. I know we have 2 in the budget that hopefully we can get. They had asked for 4, so congratulations to them. And I echo much of what Ms. Porter said, having been a teacher. I do want people to know that we have been discussing a lot about the safety of our schools. We have applied for state grants. We cannot discuss it in public, as you can understand. It's safety, and we do not advertise what we're doing for safety, but we are working hard on that. Chris Lassard has met with us several times, along with Sean Smith. So we are working on that. It's a shame we didn't have the 5 days. I look at the social, emotional PD that teachers could enjoy, could use. So many of our students have such trauma. To recognize it and know how to deal with it is so important. So I wish we had more time, but I think it would be wrong not to do something. Nashua is not using the best practices when it comes to safety. We talk about best practice all the time as teachers, and our teachers have not been trained in the best practice. So whatever we can get in these 2 hours, hopefully, I think Dr. Mosley touched on it a little bit, but PD next year will continue to have more training in the safety training, and maybe we can get the police department into specific schools so teachers can learn more about what to do in their classrooms, what to do in their schools, so that they feel more comfortable. Quite frankly, the triage part, I don't know if I could even participate in that, because I could never look at an open wound, I don't think. So I think that's something that would be voluntary. I admire people who work in the medical profession, but I think knowing what to do, this idea of sheltering in place, we need people to understand that's not always the answer, and that can cause more problems than not having a full 5 hours of training. But I think whatever we can give them, it lets everybody know in our community that we're thinking of the safety of our students. Do we need to do more? Sure. Will we do more? Absolutely. So I thank Dr. Mosley for going forward. Sometimes leadership, it's not a popularity contest, but it takes a lot of courage to do what you feel is right. And for me, I feel this is the right thing to do. I know it's a busy time for teachers, but the safety of our kids is paramount. Thank you. Okay. Student members on the board. Patrick, nothing? Okay. Committee on the budget, Mr. Kaufman?
Unless we have not met, I guess we're anxiously awaiting what the aldermen are going to do, and if they give us a number less than the 3.41 that we requested, I'm sure there'll be a budget committee meeting soon. I'm just curious, Mr. Donovan, if I may, if we get a number from the alderman that requires us to modify our approved budget, when do we have to have that modification complete?
We would have to have it ready for June 30th, so we could start the new fiscal year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Maybe, Mrs. Oden, just maybe, should we plan, can we put a meeting on our calendar? We can, a lot easier to cancel them than it is to get one on, just as a suggestion.
Why don't you send me a date that you think would work out, and I'll make sure it gets on the calendar.
Next Wednesday? All right, well, again, I don't know when the budget information is forthcoming.
Yeah, I'm hoping by the end of next week, but they deliberated last week. I believe they're doing it again this week, so we need, until they're done, it's not worth having the meeting, obviously.
Absolutely. So it'll be the third or the fourth week of June?
Hopefully they'll be done this week, I'm hoping.
Okay.
It may be next week,
So,
I don't.
Mrs. Oden, to try and answer you, as soon as we, I guess we'll hear from the alderman, and after that, we'll just have to create a meeting in response, since we have no date.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee on Finance and Operations, Mr. Guarino?
Thank you, Madam President. We have not had any meetings since our last meeting, so we don't have anything before the board tonight. Our next meeting, I believe, is in 2 weeks at 6:30, Nashua High School North.
Okay, thank you. Committee on Policy, Ms. Raymond?
Thank you, Mrs. Oden. We have a lot that we did at the last policy meeting. I'm just going to throw out right now that our next meeting is on Tuesday the 19th at 6 p.m., so I don't forget it. I'm just going to jump right in. I make a motion to approve the following policy name changes. Policy 1124 to Policy BDEC, Curriculum Evaluation Committee. To change Policy 1126 to BDED, which is Finance and Operation Committee. And change Policy 1127 to Policy BDEE, Budget Committee.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay. Did you want to speak to that?
These are just updates. We now use letters instead of numbers, and it brings the titles in line so that all of our committee titles are structured the same way.
Okay,
That's
thank
it.
you. Okay, roll call?
On the motion, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
O'Hensy,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter,
Yes.
the motion carries 9-0.
So I'd like to move to rescind Policy 1124, Policy 1126, and Policy 1127.
Second.
Thank you. And so we have found that if we do not rescind them, they kind of float out there in the general area. So this way we can actually get them off the books, the old ones, and only have the new ones. Does that make sense?
Madam President?
Ms. Van Twyver?
It's also to avoid confusion when we have two of the same policy on the books.
Thank you. Roll call?
On the motion, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter,
Yes.
motion carries 9-0.
I move to approve policy IHCD, which is the Advanced Coursework, Advanced Placement Courses policy, with the changes that were in your packet.
Second.
I'd like to thank Ms. Hohensie for bringing this to our attention. The state has allotted some monies to community colleges for students who are doing dual enrollment in both high school and community college. And by enacting this particular language, it allows the community colleges to access those funds. Further, there is a requirement in the law that we approve the particular language by July 1st in order for the colleges to be able to access those funds.
Okay, thank you.
On the motion, Mr. Mosher,
Yes.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter,
Yes.
motion carries 9-0.
Thank you. I move to approve policy BEDB as presented and amended per your packets.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Porter.
Thank you.
Did you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mrs. Oden. So this policy is regarding preparation of the agendas and for dissemination of the agendas. Two years ago, this policy was changed from saying 7 business days prior to a meeting that materials needed to be into the superintendent secretaries in order to be on the agenda, to saying the 9 a.m. the Thursday before the meeting. Having spoken with the superintendent secretaries, it's extremely challenging for them to make 9 copies of everything when they receive it Thursday morning at 9. They're just getting the stuff to then start printing and copying and get everything out by mid-morning on Friday. It's an overwhelming administrative task. So they asked that we move it back. They did not feel like 7 days was necessary. But they did ask for a couple extra days so that they could have the time to get everything together, to make sure that the packets are correct so that we have all of the information that we need in order to do our jobs here. The second change is in paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4. Paragraph 4, it did say new business will be referred to committee by the president with the board's concurrence. Having spoken with Attorney Bolton, we talked about changing that to a majority vote, which means the same thing but is more clear. And then the last 2 changes are in the next paragraph to strike the 2/3 majority. It says the board shall follow the order of business set up by the agenda unless the order is altered by 2/3 majority vote of the members. Majority seems sufficient, as we discussed in the policy committee. And then there's a line in here that says the board may not revise board policies or adopt new ones unless there is an emergency. At the policy committee, we decided to strike that as well because that is, in fact, the entire job of the policy committee is to revise board policies and or adopt new ones. So it seems odd to have it in both, there. So.
Thank you. Ms. Hohensie?
Thank you. I think the reason you have the board may not revise board policies or adopt new ones unless there's an emergency is to make it clear that the board as a whole, not the committee, but it's to ensure that you go through the committee process. And I think this is good because the last administration was giving us a little bit of a hassle because we didn't go slow enough. Sometimes the community wasn't on board. When we took it to committee, we brought it to the full board. There needs to be a lag time because the public doesn't always catch on when we're first doing something. So if we just slam it in a full board meeting, that doesn't give the public time to listen to what happened at the committee and maybe come to the board. It doesn't give them that pause and that consideration. So I think that there's a real value in it. We certainly are allowed to do it, and I think we did do it for the Narcan use, and I supported that without going to committee. But I don't think in the 2 years that I've been here, we've done that any other time. And I think it's kind of good that this board has that kind of restraint, and that we go and we deliberate a little bit slower. We go to the committee, we have it out there, we have a discussion, we bring it to the board, we have a second discussion before something's finalized. So I can't support this with that change. I'm concerned about the 2/3 majority that we had to change the agenda. I think it's got to be significant to change the agenda. It shouldn't just be a majority. And the board is usually unanimous if it's a valid concern. And everybody, even if it's not their issue, they'll go with it. But I don't want a majority. I think a supermajority is more important there, because there have been some instances where we adjust the agenda to eliminate certain people's new business because we don't want to discuss an item or two, and the temptation is too strong with the majority. Let it be a supermajority. I think it's fair to all board members.
Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. A couple of things. Relative to the time change when things are due, with this change, when we have a committee meeting on a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, let's say you're going to require this in for Tuesday morning. So if so we're Tuesday night. So if there's an issue that came up on a Tuesday night that we wanted to have addressed at the next, which would be a board meeting coming up in a couple of days, if the next board meeting, say we're in a policy committee, sometimes we may very well have a board meeting one week and another board meeting, a special meeting, and it needs to go out, and we need to get notification of those things. This would preclude us from having a meeting on a Tuesday or a Wednesday and being able to address it the following week because of this limitation of moving it up so early in the week. We wouldn't have the chance to discuss an important topic if we left this meeting and want to discuss it next week if we had a meeting. So I'm not in agreement with the first change. I think that as far as the other change, new business items will be referred to committee by the president with a majority vote. I think new business should be forwarded to the committee, and that any proposal should go to the committee for consideration. So by imposing the requirement of a majority vote, that's the way the majority of the board can prevent discussion of something that would otherwise have gone for discussion to a committee. So I think this change here forces, just reduces the exposure of ideas and discussion at the various committees. The next change had to do with the board should follow the order of business set up by the agenda unless it's altered by a 2/3 majority. And that proposal is to strike 2/3. If I'm not mistaken, and I'll ask Ms. Van Twyver to clarify. So Robert's Rules of Order, this is a core principle of Robert's. If you give notification ahead of time, to a meeting or an agenda item, it only requires a majority to change it. If you want to change on the fly, as it were, at the meeting, Roberts requires the 2/3 majority. So in that instant, and
Well, I'm not quite sure about that, but I was thinking too that you always require a 2/3 vote when you're potentially taking away somebody's rights. And I don't know if that really qualifies for this. I think I'd have to look that up.
And if I may continue, thank you. And then the next sentence that's struck, the board may not revise board policies or adopt new ones unless there's an emergency. Ms. Hohensee cited the Narcan, where the board, the urgency in the community, we wanted to get the Narcan. Narcan is the the drug that helps keep people alive in the event of an overdose and stuff like that. So it was a big push to get that accessible throughout the city, including the school buildings. So we did, at one point in time, act on that in a single night. It didn't go to committee. And we also approved the assistant superintendent job description changes that came to the board without sending them to committee. So there are times when we've done it in an emergency situation, and there are times when we've done it for normal business. So I think the provision for an emergency should be maintained. And I mean, I understand why we want to filter everything to the committee, and I agree with Ms. Hohensee on that. But I think there may, in fact, be a situation for an emergency where we'd want to, I guess you could just suspend the rules in that particular night. But at that point, you probably want to have a 2/3 majority to you know, not send it to a committee. So, and I think that my last comment would be perhaps we can check with the Roberts rules to understand better the majority versus the 2/3 when we change an agenda.
Mr. Guarino and then Ms. Van Viver.
Thank you, Madam President. 1, 2, 3, 4, your fifth paragraph, that one sentence, the board shall follow the order of business set up by the agenda unless the order is altered by a majority vote of the members present. I believe that that's consistent with Robert's rules. There is a provision in Robert's rules that actually the person can vote to follow the order of the day. So, and that takes a majority. And then when you take things out of order, is that a 2/3 or isn't that just a majority?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
So.
Well, might I suggest in that case that I withdraw my motion, we take it back to policy, and look up some of these answers instead of trying to discuss it at length here when we have a limited amount of time.
Well,
I'm sorry, Ms. Van Tuylen.
I think that this is fine the way it is. I would vote in favor of these changes right now if you didn't bring it back to policy, because I think it's been back to policy before. So.
Ms. Van Tuylen.
The thing that I'm concerned about is the last blue lined out paragraph that says the board may not revise board policies or adopt new ones unless there is an emergency. If you remove that, that means the board can do anything they want. And we do our work in committees. And it's the policy committees that's responsible for developing the policies. I mean, you think your meeting's long now? You try to get the board to agree on anything on a policy, you'd be here all night. And that's the basic reason why I don't like that. And we were right. We only did one emergency, and that was for the Narcan. We've never done an emergency policy. The board is not. So I won't vote for this with that statement removed.
Well, I'm happy to withdraw, and then we can, I can look some of those things up. People are welcome to come to policy with information they have historically, and that will help us make a better decision next time we bring it forward. Mm-hmm.
Your second has to agree, so.
I don't recall who seconded.
Ms. Porter. I don't think the second does have to.
Ms. Porter.
I do agree, so.
Okay.
Okay, so that's going back to policy. Okay, next one, Ms. Raymond?
I'm sorry, give me 1 second so I write down that I withdrew it so that I
Okay.
remember. Okay, the next one is I move to rescind policy 5420, rules and regulations for school bus students.
Second.
Thank you. In your packet, you will see that I've also included policy JIC, which is our standards for behaviors for students, which I'm not suggesting we make any changes to this evening. It's only for reference because as I was reading, and as we discussed in the policy committee meeting, the the rules in this school bus student policy that is from 1986 that are enforceable fall under our student behaviors standard policy, student behaviors standards policy. Other items in here are either unenforceable or not particularly relevant to a policy that we could. The language is not modern. The behavioral expectations are not always reasonable. Whereas our student behavior standards are very clear in paragraph 2 that the rules of our policy JIC are in effect for all Nashua students at school functions, school-sponsored events, school bus stops, and bus rides. So I don't see the need for a second policy when we have one that covers behavior on the bus.
Ms. Van Twyver.
Question, did you run this by the bus director?
Yes, we spoke with the director of transportation.
Doesn't feel it's necessary? I know my next door neighbor drives a bus, and she has a lot of trouble with kids on her bus, and I don't know whose responsibility it is to enforce those things.
Yes.
Between the bus company or us.
So, yes, we did run this by the transportation director as well as the next policy, and it is the view of the policy committee that it is the responsibility of the school principals to be in charge of student behavior. So if a child is acting out on a bus, the bus driver should report that to the school principal or report it to their supervisor who could report it to the school principal. And then the school principal should be addressing that with the student and the student's parents. It should not be the school bus driver who is trying to discipline or modify the behavior of the students beyond a reminder of the rules that are already posted on the bus.
I think Mr. Donovan, well, I'll tell you.
Yeah, that's true. It's the bus driver can, and if the student acts up a number of times, the bus driver, there's a form filled out, it's given to the transportation director, but it's really the school principal because they're the ones dealing with the children on a day-to-day basis. So, and if there's any need to be taken off the bus for a week or something like that, it's really the principal's responsibility.
Thank you.
Okay. You want a roll call?
On the motion, Mr. Mosher?
Could you recite the motion again?
The motion is to rescind policy 5420, rules and regulations for school bus students. Policy JIC, it's redundant with policy JIC.
Yes.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hohensee?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you. I move to approve the changes and rename, sorry, I don't think there are any changes. Oh, yeah, there are. To approve the changes and rename policy 5210 to policy EEA, Pupil Transportation Services.
Second.
Okay. Do you want to speak to your motion?
Thank you. So again, we did run this one by the Director of Transportation as well. These are language changes to come in line with the schools we actually have. So we've changed the title to the Pupil Transportation Services. I looked up, none of our other policies say policy in the title. They just are. We're the Nashua School District, not department. We no longer have a junior high. Thus, we no longer have a senior high school. That would be the sum total of the changes. And he did not feel any others were necessary.
Roll call?
On the motion, Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hohensee?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
I move that we rescind policy 5210, since we now have EEA.
Second.
I think that's self-explanatory. Roll call?
On the motion, Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Okay. Thank you for all that time.
Thank you. Ms. Van Twyver?
Right. I just want to bring out a point about reviewing board policies, that there's a different annotation that I believe needs to go on here if you're reviewing it. Ms. Fitzpatrick, you remember?
I did talk with Ms. Kinsella about this, and we were going to make sure that we were being consistent, but
Yeah, but there is a different, if you take the old one that's a number and you're reviewing it just because it's old, then there's another annotation. Ask Tara about it.
At the end, yes, under revised the last time. Yes.
Huh?
So at the very end of the policy, it would then
Yes,
have that, yeah.
where you have all the revised dates.
So Tara said she would add that once we have the date that it is approved or not approved by this board.
Right, but it's a different annotation than just revised. It's
I believe,
reviewed and
yeah,
accepted or something like that. I've forgotten.
and I believe you're right. I believe it's reviewed and accepted, but I will
Yeah.
make sure.
I'll ask Tara.
That complies with a 4-year, every, review.
Thank you. Committee on Curriculum and Evaluation, Ms. Van Twyver?
Oh, thank you. First thing I'd like to ask the administration to put a June 19th, 18th, and a July 16th on the calendar for curriculum meetings. Seems to have been omitted. Thank you. We met on the 18th of May. Review of some questions that came up at the previous meeting went over, and Dr. McKinney talked about the Orton-Gillingham program. And then we had a very good discussion on the national
Next Generation.
NGSS.
Next Generation Science Standards.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Acronyms drive me crazy. And so the administration is asking for a recommendation to align our K through 12 curriculum to the next generation science standards. So I move that we align our K-12 curriculum to the next generation science standards.
Second.
Do you want to speak to your motion?
Nothing else, then let's do it.
Ms. Hohensie?
Okay, I'm a little bit puzzled because the next recommendation is to extend the pilot on the next generation science. If we're extending the pilot, why are we assuming that it's all going to be acceptable and then aligning the curriculum? It seems to me that you would finish the pilot and then do an alignment.
Well, I believe the elementary and the high school are satisfied. The middle school still wants to review their resource. They're still working on that, so.
So in terms of the textbook itself?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ms. Van Twyver. Ms. Raymond and then Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, too, that at the curriculum meeting, it was presented to us that the alignment is a process. So the teachers would need to have a committee. I assume they have a committee already, but I don't know, where they are going to actually review the curriculum and make sure it's in alignment. This also would bring our curriculum in alignment with the SAS is the new one, the new SAS testing that the state is doing, and right now our curriculum is not aligned with that. Because they're following the next gen science standards.
The SAS has already got the next generation science standard test questions in it.
Yes, so I'm sorry, I didn't articulate that well. The SAS has the next gen science standards in it. Our curriculum does not necessarily have the next gen science standards for the high schools. So we would like to have the the teachers and the people who do the curriculum take a look at it, take a look at the test, and make sure that everything makes sense together. I would hate to have our children not have the information they need to take the tests that they're being scored on.
This action is actually adopting those next generation science standards. This district is adopting them, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Kaufman?
I was under the impression that the state was in the process of reviewing these standards. And if we're going to move forward and make significant changes, and if the state comes along and makes significant recommendations or changes, we will have wasted some period of time and only have to do it over. So is someone more current on when the state will complete their review of the science standards and how it would impact what we would suggesting here?
Okay.
Dr. McKinney?
Dr. McKinney?
These state standards were adopted by the state of New Hampshire in 2016 after 2 years of research, and included in your packet is an update for the state contract, which is in place until 2021 with a 3-year option for 2024. So the science standards will be here for a period of time.
Ms. O'Hensey?
Thank you. I was at a state board meeting, and I know that the department is reviewing certain standards, and I know that they're going to put science standards on the list. This is saying that maybe they have the next generation science in the queue for 3 years, but I don't know if it'll be any longer than that. And I just don't want to rush to judgment, because I just think that we're investing in a curriculum that could be modified. When they switched from SBAC to SAS, I know that a part of the contract when they put out the RFP was to make sure the vendor would understand that they're starting with a fixed set of standards, but then over time, as the new ones come in, that the SAS would be adapted to those new standards. So I kind of think that there's been a little bit of a sea change at the state, and there may be some changes in our standards. So I'll be voting against this.
Dr. McKinney, are you got anything you can say on that?
Just the last email I have here from the assessment department from the New Hampshire Department of Education states that they go under review every about 8 to 10 years after they are accepted. So being they were accepted in 2016, we have 8 to 10 years. I think the other greater concern is that our kids are being assessed in a way that they're not being taught. So in fairness to them and in fairness to the Science Steering Committee, they're asking for your support so they can align the curriculum, do some professional development, and adopt the necessary resources to meet the state standards. So I'm asking for your support. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. O'Hensey?
A follow-up to that. I understand that it's very controversial, and I know that even the Common Core standards, which are eligible for review in 2 years because it's been 8 to 10 that they were adopted in 2010, and the initial board was very adamant against it, but the board has changed over time. So I think the intent is to go through a lot of the standards, and I don't know what the pace that they're setting for themselves, but I just know that there is some disagreement with these standards there, and I'm not so worried about whether our kids do well on a particular test. I want our teachers to do the best they can for our kids, teaching them science. And if it's thinking outside the box, then that's fine, because I think if you teach science well, it will show up on a test, and I just think that these will be in flux sooner than we expect.
Are we ready for the question, for the vote? Okay.
Why don't you reread the motion, please?
The motion made by Ms. Van Twyver and seconded by Ms. Raymond is to approve the recommendation to align our K-12 curriculum to the next generation science standards. Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. O'Hensey?
No.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Motion carries 8-1.
Okay,
Ms. Van
the
Twyver.
next motion that the curriculum committee made is to recommend to extend the middle school science resource pilot through the 2018 through 19 school year.
Second.
Do you want to speak to that?
Just the fact that they're looking to further research their resources.
Okay, thank you. Roll call.
Are we ready for the motion? Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you very much. The next meeting will be June 18th, the third Monday of the month, and the topic will be data. Dr. McKinney has promised a well-developed talk on data.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Van Twyver. Committee on Human Resources, Ms. Timmons?
Yes, Ms. Porter will take this, as I was not at the last committee meeting, so she's going to speak on it.
Thank you.
Okay, we've already approved the personnel recommendations dated May 23rd, 2018. We also have a motion to recommend board approval of Heather Lucy, Assistant Principal, Nashua High North, for the 2018-19 school year at an annual salary of $84,250.
Second.
Okay. Is there any need to speak to your motion? I don't think so. Ms. Hohensie?
Thank you. I'm very much in support of Ms. Lucy, but it's not on the agenda.
No, it was not on the agenda.
Do you have a revised agenda?
No. When was that given out?
Oh, I'm
It was
sorry.
given out online?
No, I think there are copies up on the desk.
Okay, that's fine.
I,
Is there any other changes to the agenda other than this?
no,
Okay. Can I speak on that?
yes.
Yes, I did notice that as well. It's not in the agenda, but the packet is in the package. I mean, the recommendations in the package, but it wasn't on the agenda. So I do agree with him, it wasn't on the agenda, but it's in the paperwork that we have.
Roll call.
On the motion, Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter?
Yeah. Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Point of order.
Ms.
Could we just ask that we put the resume in for when we have a candidate like this for the next time for the full board? I mean, I was at the committee meeting, but I mean, for the board members who weren't.
Can I speak on that? It was in the last package that we had at the last full board meeting. That resume was in that package.
Right, but usually the night we're voting on it, it's
Oh, you
just
wanted a
past
second
practice.
time?
Correct, and we do that for policies, we do that for other things. Finance, sometimes we get them in two subsequent packets, one for the committee that week, we have a committee meeting, and then when it goes to the full board, we get the same finance, agenda items in our packet. So we do get things twice, and I'm just asking that we could get the resumes when the full board is voting on this. I just think it helps the full board, that's what I'd appreciate.
I'd like to save some money by just bringing the one from the week before to the next meeting, if you see it. And that will save us some printing time and money.
Then should we cut down all those the finance and everything else? Or should we be
That's what we need to
consistent?
do. I don't think we should be copying paper that we already have.
It's usually not very much, it's usually a couple pages.
Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. I just have a point of order. It's 5 of 9. So I'd like to move to extend our meeting for 30 minutes.
Second?
Roll call.
On the motion to extend the meeting 30 minutes, Mr. Mosher,
Okay.
Mrs. Oden,
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons,
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie,
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes, Ms. Porter,
Yes.
motion carries 9-0.
Okay. I think we're at liaison reports at this point.
No.
Is it Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. I attended the education counselor with Mrs. Timmons, Dr. Mosley, several teacher representatives on Thursday, May 17th, 2018. It was a very lively meeting this time. I think we had a lot of important matters to discuss. Safety was discussed at length. You know, I think we've talked about that already today. The other aspect to safety and other topic that came up and was widely discussed was the issue of discipline in the middle schools. It sounds like staff is feeling like our current disciplinary system is not working the way that it could work, and they would like to see more direction and more consistent standards for what to do. Specifically when we have students who are acting out physically towards staff or other students, like what should the procedure be? Not necessarily for students who have an IEP or 504, because there are plans for those students. It's the students who don't have any kind of plan, and what should the teachers be doing? Are there steps they should be taking? So it sounds like that this is the beginning of a discussion that will have to continue with administration, hopefully for the next school year, so that they have a plan that everyone feels more comfortable with. We talked about the new summer school program that's coming out. Everyone seems to be pretty excited about that. And we talked a little bit about the question of grading in the middle schools, and where is that going to go? Should we be doing standards-based? Should we be doing something closer to what the high school's doing? The answer is there's not an answer at this time. Perhaps a committee should be established during the next school year to look into that on what to do with the middle school. So, and that, the only other thing that was brought up briefly was attendance policies. So what do we do with students who aren't wanting to come to school or having barriers to come to school? Like, what's the consequence for that? And again, this month was really a discussion and not a lot of answers.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's come up a lot in the past. Mr. Kaufman?
Yeah, can we have a brief recess, say 5 minutes, before we continue?
Seeing where we extended 30 minutes.
Well, here's my reasoning. If the meeting would have ended on time at 9 o'clock, I wouldn't have had to use the restroom now. So that's why I'm asking
We
for
will take
the recess.
a quick
Thank you.
recess of 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm sitting next to him.
To reconvene the Board of Education meeting. Okay. Well, Mr. Guarino, the clerk has not returned.
I mean, it's throwing away money.
Okay.
We're going to have a grievance. It's inequitable. I hate inequity.
Okay. Unfinished business. Strategic planning members, Mr. Kaufman, and I thought we had dealt with this, but I guess you had a sheet at one point. Okay.
May
Do
I
you want to
speak to
read?
it? Yeah.
Yes.
So there were two things. We dealt with the first one at the last meeting, but this one was not addressed. So my motion is to move to require the Board of Education approval of all strategic planning committee members after the board has reviewed their biographies or resumes, conducted interviews, and determined their suitability to serve on the committee.
Second.
If I may speak to it.
You may speak to your motion.
So throughout this entire strategic planning process, I have a real problem of the board giving up what I believe is its responsibility and authority. So if I have to, because that's the will of the majority of the board, give up my authority, I at least want to know the people who are going to be making, I want to know who the people are that will be making the decisions. And if I'm not mistaken, Ms. Raymond had the policy relative to the ad hoc committees where the board did approve those appointments. And I don't have that in front of me right now, sorry. So, I'm sorry? Thank you. The board owns this as much as the superintendent. And this board has elected, these new board members have elected to strip themselves of what I believe is probably the most important thing we as a board can do for our district, is to set the strategic goals and then create a process to implement them. I'll address that when Dr. Mosley speaks to his proposal later on. But the board should have does have a say, and I think there should be a formal process. My own personal feeling is the board is best informed to make these decisions. We're giving a strategic planning committee people who will likely be not familiar with our budget at all and understand the limitations and the trade-offs that we have to make. And they will be making a decision, and they won't have the level and depth of knowledge that the board has. So that's why I want to ensure that we put people on this committee who are informed about the board, including its budget, including its policies and its procedures. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Guarino and then Ms. Raymond.
Thank you, Madam President. I think that this motion shows how little the person who made this motion understands about the planning process. This does not rise to the level of conducting interviews and reviewing biographies and resumes for a planning process. If you look at any strategic plan for any city, or even for any district, they don't go through this. They're not applying for a job. What we have is an ad hoc committee of people who are already in their positions, who will be part of this committee, who take their professional expertise, okay, and then that's how the planning process works. This is way overboard. As far as me giving up any of my authority, it's called delegation. We're delegating our authority. This is going to just hold up. This is just going to hold up the planning process, and it's just not necessary. It's way overboard, and it's just a overreaction. Determine their suitability to serve on the committee. I mean, we have a superintendent, can't do that. The administration can't do that. This is just over the top.
Thank you. Ms. Raymond?
Thank you. The policy you were asking about, Mr. Kaufman, is policy BDF, which is advisory committee to the board. The part regarding appointment of citizens, it's paragraph 6, paragraph 6. It says, the board shall make all appointments of citizens to advisory committees. The superintendent shall make all appointments of staff members to citizens advisory committees after approval of the board. Let's see, the school board shall see that the public is made aware of services rendered by the committees of citizens and shall see that the public is informed of the major conclusions and recommendations made by such committees. So that would be everything it says about citizens. To me, as I read this, regarding making appointments, I envisioned it more along the lines of what we get from the Human Resources Committee, where there's a list of people and we kind of approve the list. I certainly don't know what criteria I would require for a person to be on a strategic planning committee. Like, for example, would a stay-at-home parent who has children in the school district but no resume because they have only worked, for example, in retail or some other non-education related field, would we find them qualified? Personally, I would say yes, because they have a vested interest. I might also say a clergy member or a member of, some of our community service agencies. So I'm not sure what we would be looking for in resumes, and I'm hesitant to say that we have to have resumes and biographies and stuff without knowing what we're looking for. So that's where I'm at.
Ms. Owensi?
Thank you. I think there's been some confusion over the past couple of meetings of whether this is an advisory committee or an ad hoc committee, and I think we, at some point, ought to straighten that out. And I agree with Mr. Guarino that this is delegating away our power. I didn't support it. I mean, I voted against it. But if we're going to do it, I want to make sure that I oversee it. That's what I was elected to do, to make sure that it's fair and it's open and it's transparent. That's why I would prefer that it was an ad hoc committee, because there's more rules to make sure that an ad hoc committee has those qualifications. A resume, like you would give a resume for a job that's in detail. If you give a resume for something like this, it would be brief. A parent would be wonderful on there. I mean, they don't need a lot of other qualifications, but I just think, when you give a couple line items, bullet items of what you're bringing to the table, you can call it a bio, you can call it a resume. I think who's ever deciding is going to know that or see that. So I would think that would be simple. I don't see that as elaborate. I don't see that as a long thing. It could be half a page.
Okay. Can I be next?
Mr. Mosier? Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Listening to the Mr. Kaufman, and I think that, excuse me, I think it's wonderful that we have a good idea of who would like to be on the committee and what experience they have, what life experience they have. And I think that the stakeholders that we have, that'd be parents. It could be clergymen. It could be just about anybody, a fire chief or even a policeman. And everybody has something to bring to the table, where they have some experience in life as to what they want to do. And I think that trying to make it like an application for a CEO for a corporation, I think it's the wrong way to go. But however, if that was the case and what we were looking for, then I think that Howard would be right on the ball. But I don't think that that's what we want. We want to get a good cross-section of the city and the people in the city who have followed the operation of the schools, are familiar with the schools, any one of them, that are familiar with their teachers and their principal, and even familiar with whatever parking space they take. But to make it very lengthy and complicated, and we're not looking for Mr. Wiz or Mrs. Wiz to come in and say, well, because they have a corporate background, they do this or they do that. That's not where planning takes place. Planning takes place, if you look at the last planning committee that we had a board member on there. That was Mr. Haas. We had other people on the committee that from all aspects of the city and all aspects of life, and this is what we should be looking for, so that we get the cross section of what makes up the city of 89,000 people, because there's a lot of experience out there, and not necessarily corporate or people who have experience with planning, because planning is where you take an idea and you say, well, why can't we do this? Or why can't we do that? And you throw it out to the committee, and the committee says, well, this is the reason why. And I say, oh, well, okay, then, well, how about this? And this is the way it goes. And then you have this cross-action between the members of the committee who can determine what is going to be best for the schools or a school or for a budget. So, well, why does it cost so much to do stuff and such? And this way the ideas get manipulated and brought out into the committee. So I think that, the idea that Howard had was good, but however, it's over the top. And we don't need that. We need to look at Joe the plumber and the mailman and the policeman and the guy who fixes shoes and see what they have in mind, because a lot of times these people are very good and they're well trained in what they do, and they are intelligent, just like Howard or myself, and they are going to be the ones that are going to be the big help, the ones that are going to lay out for the future of the district.
Thank you. Ms. Owensi.
Thank you. Just a brief follow-up. I agree with what Mr. Mosher is saying on the whole. I think he's saying we want a cross-section. And I do too. I don't want to have 4 bankers. I mean, I want to maybe spread it around to different, cross-sections of industry, different people in our community. It's great to have a parent, but you don't want 12 parents. You want to mix it up a little. And I think what he's saying is the bio is being confused with a big, long resume. It's just a couple bullet points to know what this person is bringing to the table so that we know that we've got a good cross-section of our community. And I think that was the intent.
Dr. Mosley?
Part of what I think is a nice compromise, and again, for the purpose of time, is that we want people who know about the schools and people who do not know about the schools. And we want to make it as seamless and easy as possible to get a different cross-section of people to be a part of this process. So what I would propose, and I'd be happy to work with individuals on that, is to write a very brief profile on the steering committee members who are going to be part of the process. Brief profile in terms of what they do, how they're connected to the community, and just because you have a stay-at-home mom, that person is just as important as Donna or myself. We have people who actively want to be involved in the schools, but they don't want to spend an hour writing a resume out for a committee. I'm asking them to volunteer their time. They're not going to show up. I mean, this is an opportunity for us to engage the community, to find out exactly what their expectations are for the school, but also how the school can prepare them, how our kids can be prepared in the school to actively engage in a sense of conversation and dialogue with our community. And we don't want to create these barriers that prohibit that from happening. It should be seamless. We're asking people to give up an hour of their time from work and from their families to be with us. Brief profile, 3 sentences, and then we move on.
Thank you. I just want to say, if I was asked to be on the strategic committee, planning committee, or wanted to be on it, I wouldn't be looking to write a biography. I wouldn't be looking to be interviewed and then be told I'm not suitable. To think people are going to be interviewed to determine whether they're suitable to serve on the committee, I think that's insulting. I don't think we'd get many people applying, so I can't support this. Mr. Kaufman, quick, because we want to give public comment.
My purpose in putting this out there was I feel excluded from the strategic planning process by what's occurred here at the board. So if I'm being, in my mind, the strategic planning committee members are replacing what should be board members, and then board members reaching out to the community to pull in the community profile, various people that Mr. Mosier just spoke about. I believe it's the board in conjunction with the community that should be driving this. But this board chose not to do that. They decided to put the control and the entire process in the hands of a group of unelected people. They're not elected, they're not knowledgeable about the school board. So the way I look at it is, if someone is replacing me in this strategic planning process, I want to understand what kind of skills they bring to the process. Absolutely want parents, students is great too. Teachers are already on the list. The union president is on the list. We'll have one board member perhaps on this committee. I think we need to know who these people are, because we're asking them to make a decision about, you've delegated your authority to people you don't even know. And that's what's at stake here. And that's why I want to thank Dr. Mosley for his suggestion, or offer, if I call it that, to at least understand who these people are and why they've been selected and what they bring. But at the same time, the board does have the right of approval and the authority to do so, and I think we should exercise it, especially if we're delegating our responsible away to people who won't know as much about the school district as we do. It's a bad choice to what you've put us on the path toward.
Thank you. Ms. Van Twyver?
I'd like to reiterate what Ms. Johansson said. I think we need to iron out whether this is going to be an ad hoc meeting or whether it is going to be the administrative type.
Okay, but
Because
that's another issue. We need to work on this motion first.
Yeah.
Okay?
I have something to say.
Okay. Is it pertinent to this?
It's quick, and it's pertinent to this. It is an ad hoc committee. You're steamrolling over a motion that we made and passed a long time ago, which we accepted Dr. Mosley's approach and his schedule and his ad hoc committee. This is an ad hoc committee. Go back and look at the motions that we passed. It's listed online.
Is that germane to his motion?
You're talking about the strategic, the strategic plan, right? You're wondering whether it's an ad hoc committee or not.
No, we need to deal with the motion now.
Okay, all right.
To accept Mr. Kaufman's motion to require Board of Education approval of all strategic planning committee members after the board has reviewed their biographies or resumes, conducted interviews, and determined their suitability to serve on the committee. That's what's at stake at this point.
Are we ready for the vote, Madam President?
Yes.
On the motion, Mr. Mosher?
No.
Mrs. Oden?
No.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
No.
Ms. Timmons?
No.
Ms. Johansson?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
I'm going to vote yes.
Mr. Guarino votes no. Ms. Porter?
No.
We have 6 noes and 3 yeses. The motion fails.
Okay. We have one other thing under unfinished business, but I want to give the public a chance to speak. So, Dr. Mosley, could you give us a quick update on the raises and retro pay for 33 teachers?
I'm going to just defer to Mr. Donovan. He's going to give a brief update on those teachers who because of the way they fell on the salary schedule, they were, compensated and that amount total.
Okay, yes, there were 42, when this contract was completed and we finally put together what step everyone is moving to based on experience, there's 42 teachers that when the grid they were on in the old contract was higher than the step they're on in the new contract. So they would be getting a decrease in pay. So basically, we didn't change their pay. We kept their pay the same, so they're still making what they were making earlier under the old contract, and they received a $100 stipend. So the cost of that is obviously 42 times 100, or $4,200. And that's basically the response to how we approached the teachers where the grid went down.
Why was the stipend?
Sorry, Ms. O'Hensi, is this quick? Because I do want to get public
Well,
comment.
I think we should move to extend it for 30 minutes because we're not going to get it done in 5. Even the public comment.
Second.
Roll call?
On the motion to extend another 30 minutes, Mr. Mosher?
No.
Mrs. Oden?
No.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
No.
Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes no. Ms. Porter?
Yes.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 yeses. Is that, no, I'm sorry. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes. So the motion carries.
There's 4 yeses.
Was there 4 yeses?
Oh, 5. I didn't
5
hear your
yeses.
vote.
5 yeses.
I thought I had to say no.
I know, 5
Motion,
yes.
motion
I didn't
carries.
hear. Excellent. Surprise.
5-4.
It was 5-4. It prevailed, but it was,
5-4, yes.
right.
It was.
Can I ask a question?
Ms. Van Twyver had a hand up.
Yeah, I did. What's the $100 stipend for? Am I forgetting something?
They were given a $100 stipend so that they got a little bit of a raise.
Oh, okay, thank you. I would consider that a raise and not a stipend, but.
Well, just the terminology used for the payroll department, that's all. You could consider it, either way, you can, same thing.
Ms. O'Hensi.
Thank you. I had asked, and I thought we were going to get it from the last meeting, I would ask for a sheet of paper to itemize the teachers. I don't care if you put initials and I don't know the names, but it's not just the $100. It's where, where they would have gone on the grid and the differential, and the board needs to approve that. Because what we're doing is we're stepping outside the contract for 42 teachers. I'm not begrudging them that they get that, but I'm trying to technically look at what we're doing. What we're doing for 42 teachers is say, don't worry about the contract, we have a better solution. That's not going by the contract. This board needs to have that in writing. This board needs to approve that change. That's what I've been trying to say for 3 meetings. So if we could get that for the next meeting and we could approve that, it would clean it up a little. I mean, I don't know a lot about contract law, but when you negotiate a contract, everybody's supposed to operate under the contract. And you're telling me these 42 teachers don't deserve to be treated under the contract. That's fine. I'm not begrudging them that. It's not funny. It's
Well, no, it is. I didn't tell you anything. I didn't tell you people deserve anything. Those are all your words you just brought up. I am simply explaining to you what happened, okay? I'm just giving you the facts. You want to turn it into something more than that, feel free. But don't put words in my mouth, what I said.
I'm not saying you
when
said
I
they
didn't say
deserve
that.
or not.
So that's fine. I can share any information that's requested of me to share. That's fine. You know, I was not in the contract negotiation the whole time. I don't think you were, so maybe someone that was in can speak to that.
May I follow up on that?
In just a minute, can I ask, have you thought about doing a sidebar to the contract to deal with this? That's strange, but Ms. O'Gara or
Go ahead.
Dr.
Go ahead.
Leslie?
No, go ahead, Deanna.
We discussed this in contract negotiations. We knew that there were teachers that were going to be not part of the contract, and we discussed that.
Mm-hmm. But it's not written in the contract.
Excuse me. I'm going to go something strange.
Go ahead.
Mr. Marcoux, would you like to, I'm going out of order a little bit, but you might be able to clarify this for us so we don't spend 15 minutes on something that you can clarify in 2 minutes?
Sure. Adam Marcoux, President of the Nashua Teachers Union for Gillory Lane. I agree with Mr. Donovan, Ms. O'Gara, Dr. Mosley. We discussed this ad nauseum in negotiations. We knew this was coming. This was our plan all along. This was presented to my membership, to the board, as the plan for those people coming off the grid, because we knew this problem was coming. To my satisfaction, this has all been taken care of. All of those members have been taken care of. They've spent a lot of time at central office, as I shared whenever the last time I spoke about this was, that the responses to the membership from Mr. Donovan and Ms. O'Gara have been quick. They have been thorough. I have been CC'd on several of them from the members, explaining exactly why, because they were a track change. They went from a BA to an MA. They went from this to that. They had a leave of absence. They, wore a purple hat on a Sunday. This was all explained to each member who had a circumstance, and this was explained clearly to them by me and to my negotiating team and the executive board when we presented this contract to those members. Those members also heard from me directly prior to ratification of all of this that this was going to happen. So this is not a surprise to anyone. And based on everything, I'm glad that this contract's signed, sealed, delivered, and done. And satisfied with the results of the work from central office. So,
Thank you for clarifying.
does that answer the questions for the contract?
Does for me. Ms. O'Hensy?
Thank you. I understand that you had this agreement, and I'm not begrudging anybody. I'm just saying this is operating outside the written word of the contract that we as the board ratified, approved, I approved. I'm not disagreeing that they got the money they did. I just want it written down somewhere and this board to accept it, just to clean it up. I mean, I don't see why, because those 42 people aren't operating directly under the contract. There's no provision in the contract to say, well, if somebody doesn't get a raise or goes down in salary, there will be this provision. Put that in writing. Let us sign that as an addendum to it. I just want to clean it up.
Thank you.
It doesn't need to be cleaned. It was
Oh,
an
so
agreement.
then we could operate outside the contract whenever we please?
What,
I'm
part
sorry.
of what we, I'm sorry, Madam Chairman, this has been, this is not, you know what, I'm lost for words. No, in no way did we negotiate or operating outside of the contract. When you're doing, as I've explained many times, there are so many different people moving from so many different steps and lanes that there are people in this bargaining unit that would have made less under the new contract. And so that adjustment was talked with our negotiating team when we first had board members a part of them, and then subsequently after the election we had some new membership. So both the negotiation team was aware of that. Mr. Clausen was there. We'd be more than happy to have our Mr. Clausen explain that this isn't need to be cleaned up. It's just part of the negotiation that is finally over.
Ms. Van Twyver.
Thank you. I would suggest that we talk to Mr. Clausen about this. Second of all, I'm thinking, well, what happens down the line and someone decides that maybe they didn't get placed correctly? What grounds would they have to come back and say, this was supposed to be done and it wasn't done for me? I mean, is there some kind of a contractual, I kind of get the idea of what Ms. Hohensie is talking about, like a sidebar that says that everybody would be made whole, something to that effect, but.
Ms. O'Gara?
As far as to answer your question about teachers being placed correctly, in September of 2017, every single teacher in the district received a piece of paper that indicated what their credited years of experience were. Again, before we did all of this, I sent out another piece of paper to every single teacher in the district that indicated what their new step was, which equals their credited year of experience, what their old step was, what their new step was, the amounts, the difference, how they could figure their retro. And they all received that, and they called Dan and I for, 3 days, and asked us to look at those things, and we did. So they had that opportunity. We communicated that. Call us, let us know if you have any questions.
Did they sign any kind of paper that said, I agree with this? I don't expect anything. I fully trust you. People have done your job correctly. But some people forget on the other side. And I don't know, I just think it would be wise to say something to Clausen about a sidebar or something if it's necessary. He's the one that should be able to make the decision.
Those pieces of papers are going to be in their personnel file. We have to have somebody file them, but they're on record in the personnel file.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marcoux.
We did have a few cases where they flipped the number, they just transposed one and they corrected it very quickly. We had a few people question some of their placement, and we had some fruitful discussions with some of them about why they were placed where they were, and those were resolved. Every issue, to my knowledge, that was brought to my attention by a member was resolved with either Mr. Donovan or Ms. O'Gara.
Well, I just don't want to hear about a grievance 5 years down the line. But
We'll have a new contract by then. We will. This one will have expired by then.
Mr. Kaufman.
I agree with Mrs. Hohensy's intent here to just document what was done as part of the contract as an amendment or some kind of a supplement. I was on that committee for 2 years. The only negotiation session I didn't attend was the last session. And my recollection is, yeah, we want to make people whole, but we never described how they would become whole as part of those discussions. Maybe that happened in that last meeting, but the board never approved this $100 per person. And if this is satisfactory to the union, fine, and the membership, fine, but the board should vote on it. It should be documented in the contract. I agree with Ms. Van Twyver that Attorney Clausen should be pulled into the loop. If he says it's fine, then fine, but if not, then move forward with an amendment.
Ms. Raymond and then Ms. O'Gara.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to suggest, given that we're eating up a lot of time with this and we don't seem to have a resolution without talking to Attorney Clausen that will satisfy everyone, why don't we table it until we can have that discussion with Attorney Clausen? I believe we're going to see him next week anyways.
Tomorrow.
Yes?
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow. We can just, why don't we ask him tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
Can we get the
I'm sorry, Ms. O'Gara?
Yeah, Attorney Clausen was present at our negotiation. He was our chief negotiator. And so that's number one. And then number two, the board doesn't have to sign off on an agreement. And a memorandum of understanding, a MOU that I like to call it, can be signed by the superintendent and the union. And if you would like it documented, I don't think anybody has a problem with that.
Let me just rephrase. I move to table this until we speak to Attorney Clausen.
Second.
Roll call.
May I ask something before we?
Will it affect the vote?
I don't know. I want, if we're going to see him tomorrow night, if Mr. Donovan could provide the documentation, so provide it in an email to the board and to Mr. Clausen, we can talk to him tomorrow night. If we have it written down, it's easier to talk about. That's all I'm asking. And then we'll just pick this up at the next meeting if there's any resolution that we have.
What documentation are you looking for?
I want to know how many teachers, the differential in pay in terms of where they would have been or something, I don't know. I mean, you're saying that they would have been at 40,000, but that was lower than they were getting, it was a 43, so there's a differential of 3,000. I mean, a contract, that's the way things work. So I don't care what the numbers are, I just want them documented, I want the board to approve it, and I just want it tidied up. I guess it's my mathematical mind. That's the way I see it.
Yep.
Call the question, please.
Do we have to vote on that?
Votes, yes.
Oh.
We have to vote on
No,
all the questions.
table, there's no debate, so let's just vote.
Okay, on the motion to table until we talk to Mr. Clausen, Mr. Mosher,
No.
Mrs. Oden,
No.
Mr. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Raymond,
Yes.
Ms. Timmons, Ms. Hohensie,
Yes?
Ms. Van Twyver,
Yes?
Mr. Guarino votes no. Ms. Porter,
Are we voting to table, like,
voting to table this discussion until we talk to Mr. Clausen.
okay, yes.
So, yes, thank you.
Motion was also
Motion
called.
carries 5-4.
Okay.
It's tabled until we talk to Mr. Clausen tomorrow.
Let me see. How much time is left?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay. New business.
Mrs. Oden, I have another new business, because I think we did the strategic plan update.
Okay.
Point of order, I think Dr. Mosley has a presentation
I
about
thought
it.
he wanted to speak to that.
Oh, okay, I thought we did it.
No.
You know, to be brief, part of what I would like to say is that the document you see in front of you for a strategic plan is a draft. And it's a draft in a way where it gives what we call a 5-year kind of a timeline of where the district, or retrospective of where the district has been over the last 5 years. And if you look at that timeline, it talks a little bit about the process of strategic planning. It's a roadmap to achieving agreed upon goals and objectives. Part of what I brought here tonight for the board to review is my former district strategic plan and what we want to be and what we don't want to be. And this isn't a criticism of my old district and where we did strategic planning, but it was definitely a learning process. In a sense, here it is. You don't have to read it, but you can certainly see it. It's pretty thick, and certainly it is very well written. It is definitely something that is, I would say, very comprehensive. But what we learned from my former district is that we really want to synthesize and get right to the crust of things in terms of identifying 3 to 4-ish goals that the district wants to focus on. Now, with all that said, we did a brief overview of kind of the history of the district, some of the leadership, from board members to former superintendents, and also just kind of an overview of some of the accomplishments. That's not to take away from any of my predecessors whatsoever, but the purpose of this retrospective was to be brief, concise, and to kind of get to the gist of things. Where I'd like to say is that we're investigating and certainly getting the steering committee together. You would like to reconvene, and I'm very ambitious about this. So I definitely would like to have the board and in some way either meet or have a list of those individuals that are going to be on the steering committee. The steering committee is going to range from administrators in the district to individuals from the business world, BAE, local businesses. One of the opportunities I had is that I had some people from religious organizations come and meet with me, and they expressed not only an interest in being involved in the schools, but also just helping out on the schools. And so all of these different organizations, denominations, the mayor's office, teachers, local businesses, I really envision them being a part of that. So I always like to say that this is a draft plan where We would have the kickoff in the fall, followed by our initial steering committee. I've penciled in those dates because one of the things when you ask people to volunteer their time, they want to know how long and what date. And so that's why we've definitely have those dates kind of penciled in there to make sure that people understand what's going on. The final thing is that if we can survey focus groups, we're going to do all we can to get that data, everything we can, and really synthesize that, the data, to really what I would call hone in on the 3 to 4 initiatives that we want this district to focus on. When we talk about the approval process for the strategic plan, this isn't coming from me, it's not coming from Donna, it's not coming from Dottie or Miss O'Gara or anyone. This is a team effort, a representation of the district. Ultimately, when we talk about authorization of the strategic plan, it's coming from the board. The board has to authorize it through a vote. If you shoot it down and say no, there's no strategic plan. If the board collectively says, we want to see more things around community engagement before it gets approved, or whatever it is, the board has that ultimate say. So you sign off on this, no matter what this is. So it's kind of, we talk about delegation, but this delegation ultimately reports to the board. I think it's important when we talk about the strategic plan is that we can, and I make reference to this, we can focus on 100 different things and every single voice will be heard with 100 different things. If we go down that road of trying to document everything, we'll lose our focus and we'll be more doing a checkoff list than actually getting something done. What would be nice is that when we sit down next year or around the time of the budget season, it'll be very easy to direct and harness our resources based on the plan. Thank you.
Mr. Guarino?
Thank you, Madam President. This is not a criticism of your draft, but just under core values, there's something that I would like to see. You have 5 items there. I'd like to see something called equity, where the benefits of the district are distributed equally in the city among all neighborhoods, and any shortcomings that the district have are not disproportionately burdened by any specific group or neighborhood. That any specific group or neighborhood, my grammar's bad, I'm sorry, is not disproportionately burdened by any shortcomings. And I think that's equity should be part of a good plan in its core values.
Thank you.
Okay. Public comments.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I have a motion to make under new business.
Okay.
About the.
I would like to address Dr. Mosley's comments.
We don't have. We only have 10 minutes left,
So would you
and
please
we've
put this on the agenda for the
extended.
next meeting so we could respond to what Dr. Mosley said?
You might have time at the end if we cut this short now under board member comments.
No, I want to have a question, and I just don't want to do it as a board member comment. I have some questions about the document he gave us.
Okay, we'll have to do that next meeting.
I have a motion. I move to eliminate the professional development for teachers on Friday, June 22nd, to invite all staff members on June 25th for the PD on safety, and again in the fall, and to waive Monday as a work day for paras, secretary, and food services. Those are the 3 unions that didn't get an equitable treatment. If I get a second, I'll speak to my motion.
Second.
I think it's unfair to expect the teachers to finish up on Friday, to score exam papers, get the grades in, clean up their labs, do everything, and also fit in PD. They're going to be too stressed out. It's too tight a schedule, and I think it's inequitable to treat one union with a waiver on Monday and the other 3 unions, they have to go in and punch out to get the same wages. So as much as I didn't like waiving it for the teachers, because I thought 180 days would be better for the district, I will wait. This motion waives it for the paras, secretary, and food services bargaining unit to be equitable And I think that's fair. I think we treat all our staff like they're on the same level, like we value them all and treat them the same. And I hope this will be supported.
Mr. Kaufman?
Thank you. I'd like to amend the motion to include all staff. So that's, or the staff that are not employed by unions.
Okay.
That are hourly, such as the TIAs. I think they seem to just fall by the wayside and things like that. I'm not exactly sure who all those people are. I could identify the TIAs specifically.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. Ms. Raymond, thank you.
So, I actually, I agree completely with the sentiment of wanting to pay everyone for that Monday. I would love to do that. I was totally in favor of that. But we had a very long presentation at the last meeting about how we can't do that per the contracts. So unless I misunderstood the presentation, the contracts for the pairs, for example, we had a chart, we had several charts that said that we are prohibited from doing that under the contract, as much as I would like to. Having said that, my understanding is, at least for the paras, that the administration has been working hard to be very flexible. I know word of mouth that there are some that are working those 5 hours by staying late a number of days between now and the end of school year, as opposed to planning on coming in on the 25th. I don't know what everybody's doing, but...
Did you want to speak to that, Dr. Mosley?
I don't have all the numbers in front of me, and I'm not sure of the motion. I guess if we're waiving the day, there are some financial pieces to this as well, you know, and I don't know what that motion would carry at this point. So, you know, listen, I'm going to just say that, and not to belabor this anymore, that it's incumbent on us to keep our kids safe. And God forbid something happens to our kids, that we don't get training or something, then that responsibility falls on us.
Ms. O'Hensi.
Thank you. To address Ms. Raymond's question, I think the difference was we didn't waive it for the paras, the secretaries, and the food service because it was easier for HR if they had a punch clock, punch in, punch out. It would be computerized. They could figure out their hours, and rather than to manually go through it. I don't think there was a contractual conflict for waiving their day and inviting them in to do PD. I don't see how anybody, you're waiving the day, say we'll pay you for free, but we have this if you want to, you're invited to come. And we had the numbers from Mr. Donovan. It was somewhere in the neighborhood of $270,000 totaled with the teachers and the miscellaneous others.
So I've just reviewed the information that was provided to us for the last meeting, and it's very clear that we cannot pay them if it's not a work day. If school is canceled for non-weather related items, the contract specifically says that they must use personal leave in order to be paid.
Follow
up? Ms. Timmons, you had your hand up. You hadn't spoken? Okay. Okay.
No, I mean, we did talk about the contracts as has been mentioned. That was mentioned at the last meeting. And it had nothing to do with HR. It's a punch in, punch out for Kronos. That's what we do for payroll. And it's just, you know, the thing that I want to put across here, forget about the equity and all that stuff, because both sides can talk about that all day long. Hourly people get paid for when they work. Salaried people are quite different. Go to the Department of Labor, and they will explain everything to you. Mm-hmm. That's my personal opinion. And the other thing is, I have a budget I have to manage. The more you give away, the harder it's going to be. So, you know, put it on me, and if I don't have the money, I can put it right back on you guys.
Ms. Fintweiler.
I just want to remind food service, they get paid, and she has to make her budget. If she doesn't make her budget, that goes right over to the operating group.
That's right.
Okay. Ms. O'Hensy, do you have something new to add?
Yes, last year we gave 2 days of pay, and we paid them, and they didn't come into work.
That's right. It was a
And-
bad idea then, it's a bad idea now.
The bad idea this year. I would rather that everybody worked on Monday and we did professional development. That's where I was at the beginning. But since we gave away the farm for one union, we have to treat the others and the non-union people equitably. So that's where I'm at. Otherwise, people have a right to grieve it. I mean, we're not treating them fairly.
All the hourly employees are being treated the same.
True.
Even the non-affiliated are being treated the same. Everybody was welcomed to come and work on Monday. So were the TIAs as well.
We're going to take roll that day to let us know how many people actually show up?
Excuse me?
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Did you want to be recognized?
Yes, well, I already said it. Mr. Donovan heard it, so.
Are we ready for the motion?
I'd like to say my piece too.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Mosher.
You know, in my career at the Indian Head Bank, we had salary people and we had hourly people. I was one of the people who was salaried, and I wound up putting in a lot more hours on my salary than what I was actually being paid for. But the hourly people, that was a different story. They put in 15 minutes more. They got paid 15 minutes more, and that's the way it has to work. That's the class difference between salaried and hourly. And I've been on both sides of the fence. And sometimes when you're hourly, you got to do what you got to do, and you got to bite the bullet. But the same thing is true when you're salaried. There are times when you have to do what you have to do, and you bite the bullet. So you can take it from there. And as much as you want to give away the farm, you can try it. But later on, you got to pay back, and that's where it hurts.
Thank you. Could you read the motion, please, Mr. Garino?
Do you mind repeating that, Ms. Hohensee? I didn't catch everything.
Move to eliminate Friday, June 22nd, PD for teachers. Invite all staff on June 25th for PD on safety, and then hopefully again in the fall. And waive Monday as a work day for the paras, secretaries, food service, and other unaffiliated staff.
On the motion, Mr. Mosher?
No.
Mrs. Oden?
No.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
No.
Ms. Timmons?
No.
Ms. Hohensee?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
No.
Mr. Garino votes no. Ms. Porter?
No.
We have 2 yeses and 7 noes. The motion fails.
Okay, I'm going to go to public comment now. If anybody is still here, wants to speak.
Not on. There we go. Thank you. My name is Deb Howes. I've been a teacher for 15 years at Amherst Street School. I'm also vice president of the Nashua Teachers Union. And I want to talk a little bit about the safety training. I appreciate the urgency of this training as one of those teachers who was trained, like one of the board members so eloquently described, in shelter in place. That is a pretty helpless feeling. And I really do appreciate the chance to update my safety training so that I can do a better job of keeping my students and myself and my colleagues safe. I still do question, as did several teachers here tonight and several teachers I've talked to out in my building and in the district, question whether 2 hours in a large group is going to do what we need to do. I need to be doing that training with the other teachers in my school, all the paras in my school, the food servers, the custodians, the secretaries. All of us are a team, and in an emergency, we would have to act together. So if June 22nd is the start of this conversation, I really urge you to make sure that we are given the time in the fall to work together in our building teams because that's where the real meat of the training is going to have to take place as we think about the particular geography of our building, the students we know, and who you're going to rely on to help you when something happens. So we really urge that this be an ongoing conversation, just the start of it. And I heard several board members at the beginning of the meeting, or actually about 7:30-ish, talking about the proposal for having 5 days of PD at the end of the year that we all thought was a great proposal at the time, until it came down to those details. It didn't go forward because some of our members, one of our units wasn't going to be able to be paid to do the 5 days of PD. And therefore, that couldn't move forward. As much as we would like to, we cannot ask, particularly our members who make the least, to go without pay. We just can't do it. But thank you for listening to me, and have a good night.
Anybody else? Okay. Looking for a motion. It's 10 o'clock. Our time is up.
Motion to adjourn?
Second. On the motion to adjourn, Mr. Mosher?
Yes.
Mrs. Oden?
Yes.
Mr. Kaufman?
Yes.
Ms. Raymond?
Yes.
Ms. Timmons?
Yes.
Ms. Hohensie?
Yes.
Ms. Van Twyver?
Yes.
Mr. Guarino votes yes. Ms. Porter?
Yes.
Motion carries 9-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
10 o'clock, the meeting is adjourned at 10 p.m.